ever noticed how often humility gets twisted into something else? Either self-criticism that tears us down, or fake modesty that's really just angling for recognition or reward? Religious stories do this too, turning humility and kindness into transactions with promises of eternal payoffs for good behavior. But what if we stripped away the bargaining and saw these lessons for what they really are? A challenge to live with authenticity, to give without keeping score, and to grow into better people in the here and now. Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, we'll explore the difference between humility that's transactional and humility that transforms us, between kindness that's given for reward and kindness that builds stronger communities right where we live. In this episode, we're asking a tough but liberating question. What happens when we stop treating humility and kindness like bargaining chips and start practicing them as habits that shape who we are? Because if we want real growth, individually and together, it's not about eternal promises. It's about the choices we make right now. So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring readings from the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't demand a belief in the supernatural. And what that means from a practical standpoint is that we will assume that these stories and writings are fiction, written by pre-scientific people with their own agendas and different audiences. Now, you might agree with the lessons I find, but I encourage you to look for something that rings true to you. Part of the beauty of understanding these writings as sacred myths is that we're free to interpret them for ourselves. We're free to learn the lessons that we need right now. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C. Our first reading is from Sirach, chapter 3, verses 17 through 18, verse 20, and verses 28 through 29. Our second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. It's chapter 12, verses 18 and 19, and verses 22 through 24a. And our gospel reading is from Luke. It's chapter 14, verses 1 and verses 7 through 14. Now we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from the book of Sirach. My child, perform your tasks with humility. Then you will be loved more than a giver of gifts. The greater you are, the more you must humble yourself, so you will find favor in the sight of the Lord. Neither seek what is too difficult for you, nor investigate what is beyond your power. The mind of the intelligent appreciates proverbs, and an attentive ear is the desire of the wise. As water extinguishes a blazing fire, so almsgiving atones for sin. Our second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, you have not come to something that can be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that not another word be spoken to them. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. And our gospel reading is from Luke. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come to say to you, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." All right, so let's go back and take a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from Sirach, and this reads like the advice of a wise parent, reminding us to approach life with humility. It's a timeless lesson, but it's one that tends to get drowned out today, especially in a culture where arrogance and bluster are oftentimes mistaken for strength. The danger is that too many people lead by example, but the example they're setting is a bad one. Instead of showing that strength and humility can go hand in hand, they show us that ego and overconfidence are what get rewarded. And that message, that can be contagious if we're not careful. Now, the writer here frames humility as recognizing your proper place before God. But that's where we can take a different angle. We don't need to see ourselves as small or unworthy in order to be humble. In fact, when we look at the vastness of the universe and admit how much we don't understand yet, well, that alone should spark humility. But humility doesn't mean shrinking back or selling ourselves short. Humility involves acknowledging our limits while still daring to stretch those limits. It's that delicate balance. Right? Don't get cocky, but don't stop growing either. And then the reading shifts, saying that almsgiving atones for sin. It skips a couple verses and then plunks that down in there from later in the reading or later in the book. From a humanist perspective, let's reframe that. We all make mistakes. Right? We all fall short. But what balances things out is what we do for others. When we give, right, our time, our care, our resources, when we do that, we repair harm and we create more good in the world. It's not about pleasing a deity. It's about making sure that the weight of our actions tilts toward kindness, compassion, and generosity. Helping others is one of the best ways to stay grounded. One of the best ways to remind ourselves that humility isn't just about how we see ourselves. It's also about how we treat everyone else. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that we should remain humble while continuing to test our limits. Humility isn't about bowing down or playing small. It's about recognizing that we don't know everything and that we're not the center of the universe. At the same time, it's about having the courage to keep learning and keep trying to become our best selves. When we combine that drive with generosity, that's when we turn humility into action. We stay grounded, but but we keep moving forward. And that's the kind of the sweet spot we should aim for. We should remain humble while continuing to test our limits. Our second reading was from the letter to the Hebrews. And when we peel away all the supernatural elements in this passage from Hebrews, there isn't much left to work with. But if we look closely at the mythological imagery that's presented here, we can see what the writer was aiming at. This was about a shift in understanding. In the old stories, God was distant, impersonal, and powerful. It's something you experienced through storms, fire, and the trembling mountains. In this later vision, in the New Testament, God becomes near and intimate, almost like just being woven into the fabric of the universe itself. That image resonates even without religion. The awareness that we're small, yes, but also deeply connected to everything around us. Now then we get the line about blood that speaks a better word. So mythologically, it's a contrast, saying that Abel's blood cried out for justice after he was murdered, but Jesus' blood, the author says, cries out for mercy. Now, setting aside the supernatural claims, that's a rather stark moral contrast. Vengeance versus mercy. Right? The old ways say, punish the wrongdoer. The new way says, forgive, accept, show compassion. This pivot is powerful, and it's something that still matters in the world today. We're constantly faced with the choice between retaliation and reconciliation, between piling on judgment or working to achieve better understanding. The truth is, Christian nationalism turns this message completely upside down. Instead of leaning into mercy and love, well, it doubles down on fear, judgment, and definitely control. It waves the Bible around like a weapon, but ignores passages like this one that call for compassion and forgiveness. The irony is very hard to miss. A movement that claims to defend Christianity often distorts it into something mean-spirited and authoritarian. And when faith is twisted into a tool for domination, it betrays the best parts of the tradition, and it poisons public life for everyone. That's why it matters to reclaim the better choice, the human choice, mercy and love. So the main lesson I got from our second reading is that the best choice is mercy and love. When we strip away the religious packaging, the message of this reading is clear. We always have a choice in how we respond to others. We can choose to lean into fear, judgment, and punishment, or we can choose mercy and love. And it's the second choice that creates connection. That second choice eases suffering, and it allows everyone to flourish. Religion may try to tie that to a covenant with God, but we can understand it simply as a covenant with one another. Mercy and love are the foundation of thriving communities and fulfilling lives. So the best choice is mercy and love. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Luke. And this story offers a double lesson about humility, and one for guests and one for hosts. As a guest, the advice is simple. Don't take the best seat at the table. Let the host decide if you belong there. In other words, don't assume you're more important than anyone else. That's a good reminder for us today, because so much of modern culture pushes us to grab the spotlight, to be seen as impressive. In essence, to demand the best seat at the table. But true humility means letting go of that need for status and instead trusting that our worth isn't measured by where we sit, but by how we live. The harder lesson, though, is for the host. Jesus says to invite the poor, the crippled, and those who can't repay you. That flips social expectations upside down, because hospitality was, and still is, often treated as a kind of transaction. You invite people who can return the favor. You build your network. You climb the ladder. But here, the advice is to break out of that cycle and welcome those who can't give anything back. Unfortunately, the teaching then gets tied to a reward in heaven, which actually cheapens the whole idea. If the only reason to be kind is because you expect to be repaid later, even by God, that's not true humility. That's just another transaction. Kindness doesn't need a cosmic scoreboard. Kindness is valuable because of the good it brings into the world right now. And that's the deeper truth we need to consider. Humility and generosity aren't about heavenly points or eternal rewards. They're about becoming better people right here and now. If we spend our lives chasing power, recognition, or even repayment of any kind, we'll almost always end up feeling empty, surrounded by false friends and shallow relationships. But when we learn humility, when we treat others with respect, when we offer kindness without expecting anything in return, we actually build stronger connections and more meaningful lives. That's not divine judgment at work. It's just the natural consequence of how human beings thrive together. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that humility allows us to become better people. Humility is not about making ourselves small or waiting for some future payoff. It's about living authentically and treating others with respect today. Tying kindness to the promise of eternal reward not only dilutes it, because it shifts the focus from generosity to self-interest. But when we let go of that need for repayment, either now or in some unprovable afterlife, and just act from genuine humility, we don't just make the world better for others, we make it better for ourselves too. That's the real wisdom in this passage. Humility allows us to become better people. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from Sirach, the main lesson I came away with was we should remain humble while continuing to test our limits. In our second reading from Hebrews, the main lesson I got was the best choice is mercy and love. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was humility allows us to become better people. What ties these readings together is the reminder that real goodness isn't transactional. It's not about angling for the best seat at the table or giving so you'll get something back, or even being merciful because you expect a heavenly reward at some point. Genuine humility, mercy, kindness, they have value on their own because they make us better people and create stronger communities right now. When we stop treating virtue like supernatural deal-making and start living it authentically, we'll discover that the payoff isn't in some distant promise. It's in the way our lives and relationships are transformed right now. That's the kind of power we can all choose to embrace. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what lessons really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what and now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about this because it's hard not to live transactionally. Most of us keep a mental scorecard. Right? Who remembered our birthday? Who returned the favor? Who never seems to reach out first? That's human. But it keeps us stuck in shallow exchanges instead of focused on building deeper connections. This is important because humility is often misunderstood. It's not about putting ourselves down or slipping into self-criticism. True humility is about perspective, recognizing our place in the bigger picture while still valuing our own worth. We should care about these lessons because it's much easier to fake humility when there's the promise of a heavenly reward. If we think we'll be repaid later, then acting humble becomes just another transaction. What's harder and far more meaningful is practicing humility for its own sake, without keeping score. This is important because genuine humility, mercy, and kindness are rare. That's why they're powerful. They shape us into better people, and they transform our communities into places where trust, compassion, and respect can thrive. If we ignore this, we end up trapped in cycles of ego, resentment, and scorekeeping. But if we embrace it, we discover the freedom and the strength that come from living with authentic humility. That's what makes these lessons matter. And the last question I'll try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Where do we go from here? Well, so how do we actually live this out? It's one thing to agree that, humility, mercy, and kindness, they shouldn't be transactional. I can agree with that. It's another thing to practice it when our instincts pull us in the opposite direction. That's why it helps to take small, concrete steps. And we don't need to overhaul our entire mindset in 1 week. But we can test ourselves in little ways that help build new habits. So with that in mind, here's your challenge for the week. Choose one situation where you would normally keep score and deliberately let it go. All right, I'll say that again. Choose one situation where you would normally sort of mentally keep score, right? Maybe with a friend, a family member, a coworker, whatever it is. One time when you would normally sort of keep score and deliberately let it go. And do something kind, offer support or extend an invitation without expecting anything in return. And when that little voice pops up saying, they owe me, make the conscious decision to set it aside. Right? Let it go. You see, when we break the habit of keeping score, we free ourselves from a cycle of quiet resentment and disappointment. Instead of measuring every relationship by what we get back, we open ourselves up to more authentic connections. This really is a challenge. It's not easy, especially not at first. But humility and kindness can become habits, just as keeping score can be a habit we learn to break. I've seen this firsthand with students in the youth group over the years. Many of them started volunteering, just to get the service hours they needed for confirmation or for the National Honor Society. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. Right? They noticed how good it felt to help. They built friendships. They started connecting with people outside of their usual circles. That kind of growth doesn't come from an external reward. It comes from the experience itself. External rewards make kindness transactional, even cheap. But intrinsic rewards, the way we grow, the way we connect, those aren't transactional. They're what shape us into stronger people. For me, I've tried to make helping others a habit without keeping score. These days, I'm just not wired that way anymore. I'm not wired to keep score. The biggest risk, of course, is that some people might take advantage of my generosity. I honestly don't know if it's intentional or not, because I'm not tracking the give and take anymore. But in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather face that risk than live with the constant frustration of an unbalanced relationship scorecard that I was keeping. Now, here's the very practical part. When you let go of the need for repayment, you actually lower your stress, you improve your relationships, and you create a lot more opportunities for trust. It's not about becoming a doormat and letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing generosity and humility because they make your life richer. The growth comes from learning that your value as a person doesn't depend on the return you get. It depends on the kind of person you're becoming. Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. H. Jackson Brown, Jr., the author of Life's Little Instruction Book, once wrote, "Remember that the happiest people are not those getting more, but those giving more." I love this quote because it cuts right to the heart of our challenge. The happiest people aren't the ones with the longest scorecards or the most favors returned. They're the ones who give freely without keeping track. That's exactly what we've been talking about. When we let go of the transactional mindset, we stop measuring relationships like ledgers and start experiencing them as connections. And that's where joy lives. This is why our challenge this week, to offer kindness without expecting anything in return. That's why that challenge matters so much. It's not just about being noble or selfless. It's about rewiring the way we think and live. Every time we act with humility and generosity, we strengthen the habit of giving more and needing less. And as Brown reminds us, that's the real source of happiness. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. But in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our challenge for the week. But also pay attention to any important lessons you come across, wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that genuine humility, mercy, and kindness have value on their own because they make us better people and create stronger communities right now. Scripture quotations are taken from the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. Copyright 2021 by the National Council of Churches of Christ in the United States of America. Used by permission. All rights reserved worldwide. Thanks again for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/thecodaproject. Every week, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find both the podcast and the occasional video presentations at thecodaproject.com. CODA stands for Creating Our Divine Alignment. When we learn to align our words and actions with our core values, that alignment feels absolutely exquisite. It feels divine. But it's a divine alignment that doesn't require belief in the supernatural. It's a divine alignment we have the ability to create for ourselves. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, and to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.